He who sees everything, or so it is believed, knows everything. He lives beyond the stars, watching your every move, every action you have ever taken, or perhaps every action you ever will take. His knowledge, if we are to trust the oldest accounts, is infinite. We turn to him daily, reaching upward for more, yet he does not simply give. Instead, we labor, and it may be precisely in our capacity to work and to think that his greatest gift reveals itself. Above the firmament, he is said to dwell eternally, and somewhere deep in the human imagination, across every age and every culture, there persists this quiet, unshakable certainty that he is watching. There is something in the human brain, something ancient, something almost pre-verbal, that flinches under an open sky, not from the cold, not from the threat of rain, but from the feeling, irrational, visceral, difficult to explain, that something up there is looking back. You have felt it, perhaps, standing alone in an empty field at night, the stars spread wide above you, and for just a moment, a fraction of a second, it is not you gazing at the universe, it is the universe gazing at you. That feeling did not begin with you. It may be one of the oldest feelings our species has ever known. And what I want to explore today, carefully, with appropriate uncertainty, is the possibility that this sensation has never truly left us, that it has merely changed its address, moved from the heavens into the cloud, traded its divine eye for a satellite lens. This is the story of the celestial gaze, the watching sky, and what it has done to the human mind for roughly 10,000 years. Consider, for a moment, the earliest humans who looked upward and tried to make sense of what they saw. We tend to romanticize this. We imagine wonder, curiosity, a childlike awe at the spectacle of stars, and perhaps, in the very beginning, that is all it was. But something appears to have changed, and this is where it gets interesting and perhaps a little unsettling. Somewhere in the deep architecture of ancient civilization, the sky stopped being simply a source of wonder and became something more structured, more purposeful, more watching. In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, archaeologists have uncovered visual imagery that repeats with striking consistency across thousands of years. The unblinking eye, the eye rendered in stone, in clay, in painted relief, staring outward with an expression that is not quite warm and not quite cold, but something in between, something like attention. The so-called eye idols of the Uruk period, which scholars tentatively date to somewhere around 3500 BCE, though these things are always subject to revision, depict stylized faces reduced almost entirely to enormous, staring eyes. Hundreds of them have been found at a single temple site. What exactly they signify remains, to be honest, a matter of genuine scholarly debate, but what seems difficult to dismiss is the sheer quantity of them. Whatever these eyes meant, they clearly meant it a great deal. Egypt, of course, gives us the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus, symbols so persistent that they arguably never disappeared at all. Walk through certain parts of the modern Mediterranean and Middle East today, and you will still see variations of the protective eye hanging above doorways, painted on boats, pressed into ceramic jewelry. The image survived the fall of the pharaohs, the rise of monotheism, the collapse of entire empires. That kind of cultural staying power suggests something deeper than decoration. What seems to be happening, and I want to be careful here because this is interpretation rather than certainty, is that ancient civilizations were encoding a psychological technology into their visual culture. They were, perhaps deliberately, perhaps instinctively, creating an architecture of surveillance. Not surveillance in the modern sense of recording and data collection, but surveillance in its most primal meaning, the feeling of being seen, of being known. And once you build that feeling into the sky, once you convince a population that the eye above never closes, never sleeps, never looks away, you have created something extraordinarily powerful. You have created permanent moral performance. Think about that phrase, permanent moral performance. Every action taken, not for its intrinsic value, but because someone might be watching. Every choice filtered through the awareness of an audience. This is not merely a religious concept. It is, as some psychologists have tentatively suggested, a mechanism of social control so effective that it may have played a role in the emergence of large-scale cooperative civilizations. When people believe they are always watched by a cosmic power who holds them to account, they may behave differently than if they believed no one was watching at all. Whether this is comforting or disturbing probably depends on the day you are having. Let us stay with that idea, the idea of a gaze from which there is no escape. One of the stranger aspects of the divine surveillance tradition, and I find this genuinely fascinating, if a little uncomfortable, is the specific emphasis on darkness as insufficient protection. Across religious and mythological traditions that span enormous geographic and cultural distances, the message is remarkably consistent. There is no hiding place. The Psalms describe a God for whom even the darkness is not dark. The ancient Egyptian concept of the divine gaze was similarly totalizing. Ra's eye, it was said, could perceive even what was hidden beneath the earth. Mesopotamian sky gods were frequently depicted alongside stars, those pinpricks of light that might themselves, in some interpretations, function as celestial eyes watching the world below. This is worth sitting with, not because we necessarily believe these things, but because of the physiological effect of internalizing them. There is a concept in sociology and psychology, stemming from Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon and later developed by Michel Foucault, that suggests the most effective surveillance is the surveillance that the subject performs on themselves. When you cannot be certain whether you are being watched or not, you begin to act as though you always are. The uncertainty is more powerful than the certainty. The celestial panopticon, and I think that is a genuinely useful term for what ancient cosmologies created, was arguably the most sophisticated version of this that has ever existed. Because the watcher was invisible, omnipresent, and eternal, the watched could never relax, never exhale fully, never close their own eyes without wondering what the eye above was recording. And over time, this appears to have shifted the nature of the divine gaze itself. What may have begun, in some traditions, as a protective presence, a benevolent eye watching over the vulnerable, a shepherd's eye scanning the flock for danger, seems to have evolved, in many cases, into something more judicial, more cold, more interested in finding fault than in offering comfort. The transformation from guardian to judge is one of the most significant psychological transitions in religious history, and it carries, I would argue, consequences we are still living with. Here is where things become, I think, especially interesting. The modern anxiety surrounding data permanence and digital transparency maps onto this ancient fear with an almost eerie precision. We now live in a world where, if we are honest with ourselves, almost nothing we do online is truly private, where search histories accumulate, where location data persists, where the things we have said or typed or clicked may be stored somewhere, in some server farm, in some configuration we will never fully understand. The specifics differ enormously from anything an ancient Mesopotamian priest could have imagined, but the structure of the fear, the sense that one's hidden self is accessible to a power one cannot see, cannot negotiate with, cannot appeal to, is arguably identical. We have merely secularized the dread. I want to spend some time on the mechanics of how this terror was constructed and maintained, because I think understanding the technique reveals something important. Ancient civilizations, and again, I want to be cautious about generalizing across enormously diverse cultures, developed remarkably sophisticated architectural and artistic strategies for making divine presences feel spatially omnipresent. The most famous of these is perhaps the technique of creating imagery that appears to follow the viewer from multiple angles. Certain Egyptian paintings and certain Mesopotamian reliefs are constructed so that regardless of where you stand in the room, the depicted eye appears to be directed at you. This is not accident, it is intentional design. Temple architecture frequently served a related purpose, the positioning of sacred images at heights that forced the worshipper to look upward, to adopt a posture of physical subordination, reinforced the psychological sense of being under surveillance from above. The eye was always higher than you, always looking down. Now contrast this with the concept of a personal God. Many traditions have offered, alongside their more terrifying cosmic deities, the possibility of a God who knows you individually, who is not merely observing you from a vast, indifferent height, but who is, in some sense, with you, interested in you specifically, perhaps even fond of you. The tension between these two models, the cosmic eye and the personal companion, seems to me one of the central unresolved tensions in religious psychology, because the cosmic eye offers something the personal God cannot: absolute, objective, unimpeachable witness. It has no favorites, no blind spots, no capacity for sympathy that might cloud its vision. And that is, of course, precisely what makes it terrifying. There is a profound silence to space. This is something we know empirically, and something that strikes almost everyone who contemplates it honestly. The void above us is quiet in a way that is almost violent in its totality. And yet the ancient imagination, and perhaps parts of our own, populated that silence with the loudest possible presence, an eye that sees everything, an attention so total and so perfect that it functions, paradoxically, as a kind of accusation. You are small, you are seen, and being seen, you are found wanting. Here is where I want to bring this closer to home, because I suspect that what we have been discussing is not merely ancient history. We are living, right now, in 2026, through what might reasonably be described as the most comprehensive period of surveillance in human history. High-altitude satellites carry imaging systems of extraordinary resolution. Orbital platforms maintained by state actors, private corporations, and entities whose ultimate purposes remain, in at least some cases, genuinely unclear, map the surface of the planet in continuous overlapping cycles. Every major population center on Earth is, in principle, visible from above in near real time. The phrase God view, the ability to see everything from above, has entered the language of technology so naturally that most people, I suspect, do not notice its theological undertones. But they are there, and they are, I want to suggest, not coincidental. The architects of modern surveillance technology grew up in cultures shaped, to varying degrees, by the very religious traditions we have been discussing. The idea that total visibility is desirable, that an observer with perfect information is inherently more authoritative, more trustworthy, more correct, did not emerge from nowhere. It carries, whether consciously or not, the residue of a very old theological assumption that the all-seeing is the all-knowing, and that the all-knowing is, almost by definition, right. This is a proposition worth questioning, because what is emerging now, and I want to be clear that I am speculating at the edges of what we can currently verify, is something that may be psychologically novel in a specific way. The ancient celestial gaze, whatever terrors it inspired, was at least directed by something that might, conceivably, care about you. The divine eye, in most traditions, had a moral purpose. It was watching because it mattered how you behaved. The autonomous systems that increasingly constitute the infrastructure of modern surveillance, the machine learning algorithms processing satellite imagery, the automated pattern recognition systems scanning communications, the AI models inferring conclusions from aggregated data, appear to be indifferent to you in a new and specific way. They do not judge you because they believe your soul is at stake. They process you because you are data, because processing is what they do. This may, in the end, be more unsettling than the divine eye ever was. At least the God was watching you, specifically, with something resembling intention. The algorithm is not watching you, it is watching everyone, which amounts, functionally, to watching no one. And yet the behavioral effects, the sense of exposure, the performance of propriety, the knowledge that nothing quite disappears, are not so different from what the ancients feared beneath their unblinking sky. So where does that leave us? I want to suggest something, and I offer it tentatively, because I am not certain it is right, but it seems worth saying. There is a version of looking upward that is not submission, that is not performance for an audience, that is not the anxious behavior of a creature that believes itself perpetually surveilled. There is a version of looking upward that is simply looking. The night sky, setting aside, for a moment, what we have projected onto it, is neither watching us nor ignoring us. It is, as far as anyone can honestly determine, magnificently indifferent. The stars are not eyes. The cosmos is not a courtroom. The universe, at its observable scale, appears to be operating according to physical laws that have no particular opinion about whether you are living well or badly. There is something, I think, that could be genuinely liberating about this, if we allow it to be. The reclamation of the sky as a place of solitude rather than surveillance. Not a watched space, but an open one. Not a site of cosmic judgment, but a vista that belongs equally to everyone who looks up at it. There is a philosophical tradition. It runs through certain strains of Stoicism, through some readings of Buddhist cosmology, through the writings of figures like Carl Sagan, and more recently, various contemporary naturalist philosophers, that invites us to make precisely this shift, to move from being subjects of the gaze to being active observers, to turn the eye around, to recognize that if the universe is looking at us, it is only because we have been looking at it and projecting our own hunger for meaning onto a canvas that is, at its most fundamental level, silent. Understanding the history of the celestial terror, understanding why we fear the watching sky, where that fear came from, what purposes it served, and what damage it may have done, is, I believe, one of the more useful intellectual exercises available to us right now. Because we are building new watching systems, we are constructing new versions of the panopticon, new iterations of the eye above, and if we do so without understanding the psychology we are activating, without recognizing the ancient terror we are feeding, we will produce consequences we did not intend and cannot easily undo. The question of how to live under total visibility, how to retain a sense of self, of interiority, of private personhood, is perhaps the defining psychological question of this particular moment in history. It is not a new question. It is, in fact, very old indeed, and the people who first wrestled with it, standing beneath their enormous and frightening sky, may have understood something about it that we have not yet fully recovered. We may not have answers, but we have the question, and perhaps for now, that is enough.